I just love our theme music. And we've been doing the show for almost a year, not quite yet. Anniversary show's coming up soon, but man, I don't get tired of it. It's amazing. Oh, welcome to the Unified-CXM Experience. As always, I'm your host, Grad Kahn, CXO, Chief Experience Officer at Sprinkler. And today I'm gonna do some back to basics. I was in a meeting not too long ago, let's say 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, with a customer, someone we've been working with for a number of years. And I often get called into these meetings to sort of set a framework for what's changing. So we'll talk about marketing megatrends. We'll talk about the future. It's pretty fun. Doing a lot of stuff in combinatorial future change, where multiple things happening at the same time lead to unexpected innovations or outcomes. One example would be autonomous cars, autonomous vehicles, which are somewhat tied into advances in computing sight, and also advances in what we're doing with electric vehicles. All that stuff's all driving this autonomous future. It's exciting. It's going to be great. A true autonomous car future will also mean something else, which is also fantastic, which is a lot fewer car accidents and a lot fewer car deaths, which, run at a clip of about 50,000 a year in the US, no matter what we do. Now, they do think that a significant percentage of those car deaths are actually suicide. So that's why it's a sticky number. It doesn't seem to go down, partly because, a whole bunch of those are people driving themselves into embankments and stuff like that. So they don't really wear seatbelts. So that's going to be a challenge. But in an autonomous car, you won't be able to do that. So they'll have to try something else. Well, that's kind of dark. Anyway, so what's going to happen with fewer car deaths? What happens after that? It's great, right? Fewer people are dying in cars. It's awesome. But what are car deaths the number one source of? Organ donations. Organ donations are going to suddenly become very, very hard to get. So what does that mean? Well, there's these other advances going on in biomedical sciences and 3D printing to make artificial organs. It's not heavily invested in because there are enough organ donations right now to mostly satisfy supply. But when that dries up, we're going to see an explosion there. So there'll be some interesting investments in that space. That's a good example of combinatorial change with a dark twist. So now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about this meeting I had 3 weeks ago. So I did this meeting. We're talking about the future, talking a whole bunch of stuff. And I spent a lot of time talking about Cxm because, we're the Unified-CXM Experience. I was talking about Unified-CXM as this new enterprise software category that we're innovating in. Very cool. I went on Cxm this, Cxm that. I clipped along. I had a pretty good slot, maybe half an hour or so, maybe 40 minutes. Asked, took questions. It was great. And I would say that I kind of felt like I probably killed that meeting. Wow, this is a dark podcast. What is going on here? I was like, am I okay right now? Yeah, I think I'm okay. Yeah, I had a good day. Had a fun day yesterday. Yeah, I think I'm all right. No, there's something going on. Anyway, so I did a really good job in the meeting. And I thought everyone was like really excited. And I was getting all sorts of high fives from the account team and it seemed to be going amazing. And then I'm going to have to do this figuratively because you were obviously listening to this. And this is also a Zoom presentation. So we're all still virtual. And so figuratively, a little tiny hand went up at the back of the room. I'm not saying this person's hands were tiny. I have no idea, but just go with me on this one for a second. A little tiny hand rose at the back of the room. And I said, yes, there's a question at the back. And a little voice said, what does CXM stand for? I was like, oh boy. Wow, I am doing a not so great job here. So I felt they're like, wow, I left somebody, maybe not everybody, but I left somebody in the dust in the first half second of my presentation and never really filled it in. So I have added a couple of slides to my presentation to talk about what CXM is. So the first one, and I'm going to go through them in a little bit of detail here. It'll take about 5 minutes or so to go through these, but I think they're actually quite helpful. People because people do have some questions that they bring up that we've tended to sort of answer, but always in response as opposed to clearing the deck in advance. So now I'm trying to clear the decks in advance so that people are comfortable with where we're going, so they understand what we're talking about. So let me start with CRM, not CXM. I'm going to start with CRM, Customer Relationship Management. There's some major players in this space. We're all familiar with Salesforce, a great company, one of the great tech stories of our generation. We're familiar with Dynamics 365, wholly from scratch engineered product by Microsoft that's doing all sorts of really cool things. NetSuite and many, 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 many others. And when people sometimes say, well, what's the difference between CXM and CRM? Or maybe more specifically, what's the difference between Sprinklr and Salesforce? And we're always quick to say Salesforce is a great partner of ours. We work with Salesforce all the time. Salesforce is our backend. So, this is not like either or, it's and. But for people that are like, how do I understand the and? So I think I can describe it pretty well. So CRM, what is it? So CRM shows what a customer looks like to the organization. So think of it as the organization's view of what a customer is. It's obviously focused on sales and outreach to customers and prospects, and it's a collection of people we know. That's CRM. Okay. CXM, or Customer Experience Management, shows what an organization looks like to the customer, right? So CRM is what the customer looks like to the organization. CXM is what the organization looks like to the customer. So they're two sides of the same coin, but very different sides. And CXM relies on the voice of the customer to measure customer sentiment. So, and more importantly, CXM can include people we know and people we don't know. So that's the difference. So CXM, outward facing, what we tend to call front office. CRM, inward facing, what we tend to call back office. Now, occasionally people will say, well, what about digital experience platforms like, say, Adobe? And people measuring, and optimizing the flow of experiences on a site, like looking at abandoned carts or looking at rage clicks, or just generally taking the experience that people are having online and trying to make it better. And these DXP platforms sort of fall between CRM and CXM because they're tracking customer behavior on owned properties, and they focus on delivering optimization of digital experiences. So that's kind of the behavior we see. So people we know and don't know, and the behavior we see from people sort of form what you would call the modern customer stack of CRM, DXP, and CXM. So hopefully that's helpful. We'll post some of these images online if you have any additional questions, but I did enjoy, I really, really appreciated that person asking that question. I really thought it was a brave moment, because we had just spent, say, 40 minutes on CXM. It was a brave moment. And I always kind of tip of the hat to anybody who's willing to sort of ask the stupid questions and, sort of lean out there, because guaranteed, the other people in the room had the same question, guaranteed. And this slide has proven to be extremely helpful as we sort of go through our conversations with customers and prospects, because I see a lot of people get a look of relief on their face when I take them through this. They're like, whew, now I don't have to ask the difference, and now I know the difference. So the second thing I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what are the foundational principles of CXM. This is another slide. We've never done this. We've never really talked about this. And this is an early stage, so it's likely to change, or likely to not change, but evolve or get better, I guess is probably even a better way to put it. But this is, I think, a pretty solid starting point. So again, just to repeat myself, customer experience management is CXM, customer experience management. I have had some smarty pants say, shouldn't it be CEM? But CEM isn't as cool looking as CXM. So customer experience management, and there are essentially think of those as sort of three columns. One under customer, one under experience, and one under management. And there are three kind of questions that you'd want to ask yourself under each. So under the customer, you want to ask yourself, do you approach your business from the perspective of the customer? Do you approach your business from the perspective of the customer? What does that mean? Well, do you have a persona-based approach to the 4 Ps, your marketing mix? Do you ask your customers how happy they are with your company? Do you listen to customer comments from public channels? Like, just how connected are you to the customer? How infected is your organization with the voice of the customer? Second column is experience. And this is, I think, the most powerful one, which is, do you respect the time of your customers? And I feel like sometimes with experience, people get super wrapped around their shoelaces on it. And my advice is, before worrying about the color of the ribbon, ask yourself, is your product or service easy to find? Is it easy to buy? Is it easy to return, repair, recycle? I mean, other things are important, but can people find you, buy you, return you? This is still not as easy as it should be for too many companies, and make sure the basics are being met. And finally, management. Question here is, do you rapidly respond to questions, concerns, and comments? And the question is here, when people ask you questions, do you answer them? When people have a problem, do you solve it? And when people thank you, do you amplify it? And this is tied in a way to voice of the customer, but it's this idea that people have questions, people have concerns, people have positive feedback. You got to deal with those things. Now, what's super interesting about customer experience management, and the reason why it's a changing and very complicated field, and why people in CXO roles like myself have complicated jobs, is that classically all that customer stuff is under the role of marketing. And classically, all that experience stuff is under the role of the product teams. And classically, all that management stuff is under the role of the customer care department. These are very different departments, don't ever really report to the same senior leader, barely work together. And so for the customer who's got this external view of the company, that's what CXM is, remember, they see a very fractured experience because they see essentially the org structures being revealed to the customer. And so these things aren't tied together in a way that's cohesive. So the challenge in a modern organization is, how do you get these 3 different silos to work together? We're going to talk about that in the next podcast. We're going to talk about, what is the rollout plan for CXM, and how do you unify silos, and how do you take what seems like an almost overwhelming task, which is, how do I get my whole organization to be customer obsessed and customer focused, and how do I make that happen? I'll talk a little bit about how we've done it at Sprinkler, and it should be a pretty fun episode. But that's it for today. If you've got any questions, particularly what is CXM, hopefully I have answered that question today. If you have any other questions, throw them my way. I love it. Every time we get asked a question, particularly around things people think they should know that we may not be talking about because we may have passed that sign without collecting $200, let us know. It's always good to hear it. So for the Unified CXM Experience, I'm Grad Conn, CXO Sprinkler, and I will see you next time.